We are on part 2 of studying the Book of Esther and what God is saying as it relates to us today. So I did part 2 of Esther, reading chapter 3, and one of my Bibles, the one I'm mainly in, is King James Version. And so I rewatched part 2, and I read something wrong inside there about the money. And so I'm going to read it in the NIV and then just dissect it from there. So this is part 2, chapter 3 of Esther. So it says, Haman's plot to destroy the Jews. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. And so in here, in King James Version, I have been saying King Ahasuerus. And so there is a difference. But it's just hard. King James Version is just hard for me to read. And so I think it'd be easier if we just switched to NIV. I know part 3 and part 4 I already did in King James Version, but I'm switching them now to the NIV. So from here on out, it's King Xerxes. So after these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. So in this situation, Haman has now been placed in a high position within the government. And the king has given a decree. I don't know if it's a decree, but he set him in an honor of a high honor amongst the nobles, and basically wants people to bow down to him, to honor him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay honor to him. Can I tell you, Mordecai is one of my favorite people right now. So in King James Version, it says, verse 2, and all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did he reverence him. And we'll continue with 3. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, why do you disobey the king's command? Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. So what that tells me right now is Mordecai just didn't take a stance and not bow to Haman one time. He took this stance every single time that he was in the presence of Haman. So he took a stand. Haman is an Agagite. And so if you study Agagite, Haman is basically an ancestral. It goes back generations ago, that they were enemies of God's people. They were enemies of the Jews. So by just ancestor generation, Haman is an enemy of God's people, the Jews. And so if we bring it down today, God had revealed to me, I did a video in Esther 4:14, I think it's number 77, and I am going to read Esther chapter 4 and 5 in the next part 3. But I did do a video, number 77, and God, every time I kept reading 4:14, for if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your family, you and your father's house will perish. For such a time as this, that I've given you royalty. And I'd have to read it in several versions. But every time I would read the word, relief and delivery will arise for the Jews from another place, for the Jews, God kept going, it's my people. And then he led me to Ephesians 2:14 and 15. And when Jesus came on the scene, I mean, Jesus was from the beginning, but when he had to fulfill of dying on the cross for us, going down and getting the keys, and then resurrection, and just conquering death. When Jesus came and arrived in the New Testament, he tore the veil. He tore that wall, that separation between Jews and Gentiles. And we are now one new man. He made the two groups into one. And so you can read that in Ephesians 2, verse 14 and 15. And so when we read this and we relate it to today, we're relating it to God's people. So verse 3, then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, why do you disobey the king's command? Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. I love Mordecai. Therefore, and it's biblical. So therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. And so basically the two men tattletaled on Mordecai to Haman. Verse 5, when Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. So we have a man, a wicked man, Haman, placed in a high position within government, who cannot stand the man of God or God's people. I'm just thinking about today how history is repeating itself. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, they cast the pur, that is the lot, in the presence of Haman to select a day and month, and the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, there is a certain people dispersed and scattered among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, whose customs are different from those of all other people, and who do not obey the king. And who do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I, Haman, and I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for men who carry out this business. And I just find it very, nothing comical about it, but that money is involved. I will pay if God's people are destroyed. And so I think we're seeing that here too about, money. I heard that Louisiana received $2 billion to follow CDC's guidelines. That's an exchange of money to get people to do things. Anyway, so there's a lot of similarities. So the king took his ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews, or the enemy of God's people. Keep the money, the king said to Haman, and do with the people as you please. Now, right there in that verse, when the ring left the king's finger and he gave it to Haman, right then the king pretty much came in covenant or a bind. He came into agreement and with what Haman had said. And he really came into agreement with the enemy, came into covenant with the enemy. Verse 12, then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province and in the language of each people and in the language of each people all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of the various people. So this went out to all of the government officials. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. So that means it is decreed. It is firm. There's no taking this back. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and little children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so they would be ready for that day. Spurred on by the king's command, the couriers went out, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. In the King James Version, it says, and the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan, which is Susa, was perplexed. Do we see perplexed and bewildered people today? Yes, we do. There are so many similarities we can learn in Esther about today. I have been given scripture from the New Testament because I've been taking a stand in my own way, in my community. And I've been given scripture by good friends saying, what are you doing? You're doing wrong. You need to do exactly what the government is saying. You need to do exactly what's being told. But if you study the New Testament and the government was created for criminals. And all through the Bible, people stood against things that they felt was wrong against God's people. I 100% feel like I have to take a stand against I'm not going to say it on the thing because you can get your video taken off and everything, but against what we are going through today. So that's why I know God is speaking in the Book of Esther. And that's why I love that he's showing us there are people in the Bible that stood up to decrees and mandates that came out of government. So this is part 2. It is a redo. So if you saw the first part 2, I made a mistake with the money. I kept saying that people were going to, anyway, I'm not going to get into it, so I'm correcting it with this. So what I just read, that's why I'm reading out of the NIV, because it was so confusing in the King James, even though that's the Bible I love, that I have, my study Bible. So I'm going to go watch part 3 to make sure I didn't make any mistakes in there. And so, anyway, I hope y'all have a double blessed day. And if God is speaking to you in Esther or anywhere in the Bible, if you're in Living That Christ Life Facebook group, or you want to message me or anything, I would love to hear what God is speaking to you, because I have a part and you have a part, and God takes all of our parts and it makes that big picture. God just doesn't share with one person. He shares puzzle pieces, because it's not all about one person, it's about relationships. But anyway, I hope y'all have a double blessed day.